I have cooked dinner 3 hours ago, and the onions that I have cut, I can still feel in my eyes 3 hours after. Isn't that crazy? Anyway, in today's video, we're going to talk about the Fujifilm X100VI and the Fujifilm X-T5. And on spec sheet, these cameras look surprisingly similar. They have the same sensor, the same autofocus, the same menus, the same features, but there is a few very significant differences. And these differences we're going to talk about in today's video, and you better stay tuned till the end, because at the end of the video, I will tell you for what use case I use the X100VI and in what scenario I use the X-T5. So I would say, let's get started. Let's first talk about the ergonomics and the user experience of using these cameras in practice. And obviously the X-T5 is a bigger camera than the X100VI, which means that it has a bigger grip and it also has more function buttons. But here is a few other features that the X-T5 has that make it, at least ergonomically from a user experience point of view, the superior camera. The first main difference is that the X-T5 has separate dedicated dials for ISO and for shutter speed, while on the X100VI they have merged these dials onto one. So while this dial functions as a shutter speed dial, very much like on the X-T5, you can actually lift it up and command your ISO through a little window on the dial. And this solution might sound a bit fiddly, but I've actually found it to be very space efficient and intuitive to use in practice. And I briefly mentioned the lack of a few buttons on the X100VI, most notably a video photo switch is sadly missing, and for me as a video person or a photographer who occasionally takes video, this is a bit annoying because it means that I cannot just within a split second move from video to photo or the other way around. And on the X100VI, I first have to click the drive dial and then jump into a menu, scroll through video, and then it's actually becoming a bit laggy as I come to the video section, and then I have to press video. So it's a bit more flimsy, it takes more time, and it's a bit annoying. And the arguably most practical difference between these two cameras when it comes to usability is the screen mechanism that is being used on the X100VI. Because for space reasons, I assume they have decided to go for a two-way tilt screen. So the screen just horizontally flips down and flips up, but it doesn't flip to the side. And I actually really like vertical compositions, also going like low to the ground or really high up. And that is really hard to do on the X100VI because you cannot really see the screen as it doesn't really tilt in that direction. While on the X-T5 you have a three-way tilt screen, which in my opinion is the best screen mechanisms for photographers, which allows you to do the two tilt mechanisms that the X100VI has, but it also has the ability to vertically tilt it, and in practice this has really been a big feature for me, but I do understand why it's not on the X100VI. Also, quick word on grips. Both of these cameras are not necessarily known for having a very deep and pronounced grip. However, on the X-T5, I've actually attached an additional third-party grip to my camera just because it's an already big camera and it makes the whole experience just a bit more comfortable. On the X100VI, I have decided against the attachment of a grip simply because I think it hurts the form factor of that camera a little bit too much. Instead, I've actually decided to use a thumb rest to still have some kind of a grip, and both the thumb rest and the grip of choice for the X-T5 I've linked to you in the comment section down below. And now let's get to the elephant in the room, like the key difference between the X-T5 and the X100VI. And that is that the X100VI has a fixed focal length, a 35mm fixed lens that you cannot change, while the X-T5 allows for interchangeable lenses on the camera. So in this section, I'm going to briefly run you through the advantages of having a fixed lens, but also the advantages of having interchangeable lenses. And the X-T5's interchangeable lens mount has the obvious benefit that it literally means that you can mount any lens available for Fujifilm X mount to your X-T5. So you can attach an ultra wide angle lens, a wide angle lens, you can attach a medium telephoto, and you can attach a super telephoto to that camera, but you can also get yourself f1.4 lenses or f1.2 lenses that give you a dramatically different look compared to a wide angle f2 lens, which is the limit on the X100VI. And now you might wonder, given I have all this flexibility, why on earth should I choose an X100VI over an X-T5 when I can literally have the same or better or more versatility on my interchangeable lens camera? So let's talk about the benefits of this fixed focal length. And the first reason to choose an X100VI is because the lens simplifies quite a few things. You do not have to face gear paralysis or gear acquisition syndrome that you have the urge to get yourself one lens and the next lens and the next lens, because you simply have just one 35mm lens. There is no mount on it, so you're literally stuck with the lens you have. Additionally, also if you're in the field, that actually has a few benefits, most notably that again, you don't worry, oh, should I maybe take a 50mm for this scene or even an 85mm? You don't have to think about gear in your head, and you can really just focus on the scene in front of you and make the best with the 35mm full frame equivalent lens you have. And talking about 35mm full frame equivalent focal length, these lenses are incredibly versatile because they are wide but not too wide. I would, for instance, argue that 28mm or even 24mm are already very, very wide. And similarly, if you had a 50mm on 85mm fixed lens, you would probably miss the bigger picture because your lens is simply too tight. So in my opinion, 35mm is the absolute sweet spot when it comes to the most versatile focal length you can have in a fixed lens camera. But of course, if you disagree on it, that's also perfectly fine. The next benefit of the X100VI is its size, because given it's a fixed lens, you can actually optimize the lens and bring it closer to your sensor, and therefore making the entire lens design more compact. And I could get the same 35mm full frame equivalent lens in f2 for my Fuji X-T5, but this lens is actually substantially larger than the lens that's on the X100VI, which is relatively pancakey. And the next reason why a fixed lens is actually a relatively clever idea is because it gives you additional features that are linked to it being a fixed lens that you generally do not have on interchangeable lens cameras. And the first feature that this fixed lens camera enables you is an ND filter. It's a 4-stop ND filter that functions like sunglasses, effectively blocking light from reaching your eye, or in case of the camera, blocking light from reaching your sensor, which will give you the possibility to shoot longer exposures with your camera, even in bright daylight, which is very neat because it, first of all, prevents you from having to take an additional filter kit with you. It also prevents you from having to mount an additional filter in front of your lens. And initially I would have assumed that the ND filter wouldn't be that useful because I haven't really used ND filters before, but honestly, now that I have it, I actually use it more and more. So you will be surprised by how useful this filter can be once you have it. The other additional feature that this lens gives you is the shutter mechanism that they built into the camera. Generally speaking, you have shutter mechanisms on the X-T5 that are relatively loud, so you can really hear them and they introduce vibrations. But on the X100VI, the shutter mechanism is incredibly silent, so you can really go out and shoot very discreetly, and it also introduces minimal vibrations into your scene if you want to do longer exposures. So while the X100VI gives you a few added features and also a more compact package that is super powerful for the size that it has, the main downside is of course that you're not going to do anything like telephoto work or wildlife photography. Although I have to say that even bird photography I've actually done on the X100VI. But realistically speaking, well, it's only minimally useful. So given the X-T5 and the X100VI are so vastly different cameras, when do I use the X100VI and when do I use the X-T5? So the X100VI I use as my everyday carry. It's just always in my bag, and if I get a moment to shoot, I'm gonna take it out. And often I find that the best photos I actually take when I least expect them, on the way to get from A to B, for instance. Well, on the other hand, the X-T5 I use for, let's say, more demanding tasks, when I actually go on a dedicated photography trip where features like the better ergonomics, the switch from video to photo, or just in general the better handling is advantageous. And I also use it because it allows me to change lenses and have like the best glass on it, the sharpest lenses, but also brighter apertures like f1.4 and f1.2 for instance. So generally speaking, I also use it for more professional use cases where that extra light or that extra background separation is required. So in a nutshell, the X100VI as my daily carry and the X-T5 as my professional camera. So what path do you take? Would you go for an interchangeable lens camera like the X-T5, or would you go for a smaller fixed lens camera like the X100VI? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you're interested about underrated features of the X-T5, then I invite you to click here, or if you're interested in underrated features of the X100VI, then I invite you to click here somewhere. And with that said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that was kinda interesting to you, and I hopefully see you in next week's video. Bye.